Efficiency is a metric. If I'm working, on a line in a factory, I don't know what my efficiency is because efficiency is some function of my productivity in some unit of time. I just know this machine is a pain in the ass right now. And it's not running the way that it should.
Work touches almost every part of our lives. Our time, our identity, our sense of worth. And yet most conversations about work still pretend it's a system problem or sometimes a people problem. On Work But Make It Human, we do something different. We slow down. We look at how systems, leadership, incentives, and culture actually collide with real humans. Today's guest has spent more than 30 years inside organizations, coaching leaders, optimizing performance, and watching what happens when pressure rises. George Pesansky is an operational excellence leader, executive coach, and the founder of Capacity to Care, a nonprofit built on a simple but radical idea that talent, not time, is what changes outcomes. George has trained and coached over 10,000 professionals across 6 continents. He's worked with Fortune 500 companies and nonprofits alike. And he's known for his clarity, his candor, and a refusal to sugarcoat what systems do to people. George Pesansky, welcome to Work But Make It Human. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for being here. Excited to talk about this with you. I do a couple of different shows, and Work But Make It Human has quickly become one of my more favorite ones because we do talk about how we can make the world of work more human. And this is your subject matter expertise. This is your sphere of excellence. So excited to have this conversation with you. George, my icebreaker is meant to just kind of break the ice and have a little fun here. What is the most absurd workplace policy you've ever seen or personally experienced?
My goodness. It would probably be a little bit of a competition, but I'm going to go to what I have witnessed in not just one place, but in actually multiple locations around 5S. It's a lean technique around creating workplace organization. And it is very often misunderstood and misapplied as being kind of a level of cleanliness, making sure that everything has its place, every place has its thing, everything is organized and stays clean. And was with an organization that really took on this initiative to try to really live and breathe this. And the level of ridiculousness around making sure that people's desks were clean at night, that the conference rooms had 3 different color markers on the board, and the amount of time that people spent doing audits, checking whether or not the Sharpie markers, for the flip charts were present. It just really underscored how people sometimes just sort of miss the point. And it was just the most absurd thing ever.
I get that. And your point is great because it is the amount of time that people take on minutia like that really bogs down people, right? The people who are actually doing it. It sounds great to the person who's sitting a couple of levels up, not actually making sure that there are 3 different colors on the whiteboard or whatever. But those people who end up being the ones who have to go source 3 different colors for the whiteboard or go to the supply closet, those are the people that annoys the most.
Absolutely. And I think it's a great example of, just dashboards run wild, where in that particular case, it was all about the dashboard. It was all about the audits. It was all about the greens and the reds, and somebody wanting to look at, their department to have all of these green check marks. And it's just so well-intentioned to be able to have metrics and understand performance. And it has such an impact on the people who are doing the work, and often not a positive one.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about George for a couple minutes here. George, you've worked across multiple continents. I think your bio said 6 continents. So what's a commonality that you've seen across the globe when it comes to the workplace? Is there one thing that you can think of, man, that the same thing that happens here in the US also happens in Canada and Asia and Europe? Is there that one thing?
Oh, yeah. And it really, underscores kind of my belief and practice of how much frontline leadership matters. You know, that first layer, sometimes they may call it a supervisor or a lead, but it really is the person trying to help make sure the work is happening to a standard, helping empower the people who are responsible for creating value. Organizations really kind of look at that as kind of the redheaded stepchild, you know, the outsider. And I've seen them put so much time and energy into picking, you know, the plant manager or picking the vice president, and how important and how impactful. The reality is, the more layers you go up, the less of an impact you have. Picking those frontline leaders and empowering and training, no matter where you go in the world, that is going to dictate exactly what's happening, where value is being created.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And along those lines with leaders, when they say we just need to find people that perform better, what are they missing from the human element or the human aspect of that statement?
You know, I think it's an indictment of their own leadership. You know, I think every team, every organization, every individual has enormous potential. And when we start kind of dismissing people in the sense of them lacking potential, it really should be more of an indictment of your own leadership, of your inability to kind of get that potential out of them, to position people in the places where they're going to shine and do the best work, to organize the culture, you know, have the systems. It's just so easy to kind of skip into, well, this is, you know, if I had better people, not the case, you know, it's just not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's something that high performers, right? We talk a lot of on different shows that I have in the world of work about those high performers. What do those high performers typically understand that others within the organization, namely leadership, maybe don't?
Yeah. I do think there's a huge element around getting the people around you to contribute to the work that you're doing. I, you know, often run into the superhero inside of a factory, inside of an organization, who is kind of running around and fixing all the problems and correcting everything. And although they individually are having a huge impact, they often also have the respect of the people who are actually doing the work. And they're almost relieved when this person comes to help, because not only are they going to correct and fix the situation, but they're also going to make me feel good about it. They're going to help me understand how I can perform, how I can support. And that really represents that super performer. You know, that represents the person who is not just thinking about the technical bit, but also building that acceptance. And I think that's the key, is having that empathy and recognizing that your solution is only going to be as good as people's willingness to adopt it, accept it, buy into it. And I think that's the trait, you know, is not just focusing on the technical part, but really focusing on the buy-in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so is there, I mean, you've coached over 10,000 people, right? And that's a lot. And bless you, because that takes a lot of patience and skill set in itself. But what do those top performers, those high performers struggle with that the rest of the world doesn't even see, or they're not paying attention to?
You know, there's a lot that's been written, and I think a lot of people have this personal experience that, you know, as you transition through an organization, you spend a lot of time as a leader, kind of what I'm going to say, managing and leading down, really trying to help and support and engage the team that you have. And then there's a point in every organization you reach where that manager wakes up on a given morning and realizes they spend most of their time managing up, that they're really kind of satisfying the reports, satisfying the dashboard, satisfying the expectations. And the amount of time they spend with their team is rather small in comparison to the amount of time they're kind of taking care of everyone above them. And I have kind of always found that the people who may have the strongest, the brightest reputation, be seen as maybe the up and comer, are often the people who are the best at managing up, because they're communicating and they're kind of creating a perspective. And the people who have what I call utility, that keep their head down, they really support and help the people around them work successfully. They often kind of miss this completely. They don't even really think about it. Like, well, why would I spend time making sure my boss's boss feels good about what I'm doing when I can go out and do it?
Right.
And it's just a completely foreign concept to people who I think truly have utility. For some people, that is their job, is to manage
Yeah.
their boss's boss.
Yeah, and it's such a, and we'll get into what we're going to talk about, kind of the meat and potatoes here in a little bit, but it's wild to me. And I mean, we see it all the time. I see it in my wife's organization. I see it in organizations that I've worked for and coached and consulted for. That we are promoting people not based on their ability to lead people. Sometimes it's because the person in front of them died or retired, right? And it's just organizational need and they don't have the skill sets to lead people. They were just next up on that org chart. But we do see a lot of people who are promoted solely because they are great at managing their boss's boss and
So,
those levels of expectations, right?
yes.
It blows my mind that we get there. Along those lines, you talk a lot about operational excellence, and that operational excellence office often focuses on efficiency as a metric, right? And so, how does that as a metric, how does efficiency as a metric kind of go against human centered leadership principles?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier this concept of, dashboards and kind of how they've sort of run wild. And I think as more digital tools and AI become available, I've seen this proliferation of dashboards, where it's just easier for everyone to do even more. And it's not a good thing because efficiency is a metric. If I'm working, on a line in a factory, I don't know what my efficiency is because efficiency is some function of my productivity in some unit of time. I just know this machine is a pain in the ass right now. It's not running the way that it should. And I get that it might not have good efficiency, but I don't know what that number is. I don't even know what that means because if you measure it over the last 10 minutes, it's terrible. Over the last 2 hours, maybe okay. And over the day, maybe you're going to give me a green screen check mark. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I do know is the last 10 minutes has been rather horrible. I really think when it comes to people, I love this concept of the golden hour of really giving them a leading metric versus a lagging metric and saying let's try to stretch and extend the periods of things going well, and let's identify the things that disrupt those periods of us going well, because whether I'm manning a customer service line, whether I'm running a machine, whether I'm taking care of the front desk at the hotel, I can tell you how long it's been since I've been hassled, how long it's been since something went wrong. The people who do the work know that number and they know a good day. And the definition of a good day is I had a relatively long and frequent period of things going well. And that really put me in a good mood. When things frequently don't go well and I can't even get 10, 15 minutes without having a mistake or a problem with my computer, I know it's not a good day. And to me, that's a much more realistic measurement than what we often see in those dashboards.
I totally agree. And so maybe I'll now reframe my statement earlier. Not only is it that person who died or retired that gets promoted or manages the boss's boss and manages up, but the people who are promoted are the ones who are able to decipher the data from dashboards, right? Where maybe the people that we should be promoting are the ones who are talking to people and interacting with their staffs and really understanding what drives them and motivates them and what a good day looks like and a bad day looks like. Am I off base in that reframing for my own definition here?
No, no, not at all. I think it comes down to people who build respect. Because if you think about people who build respect, they have empathy. They understand the circumstances that others have to deal with. And they tend to do things that are going to impact others in a positive way. And they tend to be selfless. And I find it so interesting, the rate that small businesses fail at is just astounding to me and disappointing because so many people pursue their dream and they're a great baker, they're a great plumber, they're, great electrician, and they decide I'm going to buy a truck and I'm going to start my business. And a year later, it's a horrible thing where they're trying to keep their house. And it's not because they weren't a good plumber or a good electrician. They weren't good at business. And I think that lesson, that data absolutely applies in larger organization and teams where organizations will often promote somebody for their technical competence, that this is the best plumber, So therefore, we should put them in business. Not necessarily, right? I would much rather promote the person who has the team's respect, who may not be your most technically competent, but that's going to give them an edge in leading that team. And they may not have that technical knowledge, but that's okay. Others will support and help. But respect is a lot harder to get than that technical skill, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, part of our pre-interview was to me the connection over a very simple statement that good leaders surround themselves with people who are better than them at certain skills, right? And that's, to me, that's what a great leader does. A great leader takes a step back and says, I am good at X. I am not good at Z or 1 or 2 or 3.
Exactly.
So I need to hire somebody who is an expert on Z1, 2, or 3, and 3, but then not get defensive when those people actually execute and do those things better than they can, right? Because I think we've both seen it that way, where a subject matter expert is brought in, hired by a good leader who recognizes their shortcomings in certain areas, but then gets upset or defensive or wants to take credit when that person actually executes at a high level.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. The need to hire in my own image, that I really want people who think like I do, maybe have similar experiences, similar perspectives, because the perception is if we have these shared perspectives, we're going to get along. We're going to have, kind of this, and the opposite is always true. When you have these shared perspectives, when you disagree, it's going to be like, hey, what's wrong with you? Because I bought you, I kind of brought you in on a personal level because we really clicked, and now today we're not clicking. Well, of course that was going to happen, and you're going to be disappointed. I think what you're pointing out is just so much healthier to recognize that, my personality has certain characteristics, and I really want to bring in people who are kind of the other side of that dichotomy, the other side of that perspective, because they're going to just naturally see things differently than I will. And that gives me kind of that more well-rounded group team for us to make better collaborative decisions.
And that's where innovation comes from. That's where organizational growth and personal growth and develop comes from, is when you're not a homogenous team and everybody looks and sounds and speaks like you as a leader, right?
Yeah, 100%. We talked about the folks that I've coached over my career, and a lot of what we do is in operational excellence, helping people really develop the skills to go out and run and execute projects to drive change in the organization. And it's the same pattern over and over and over again. These individuals, their first project, they go to pick a team and they pick everyone that they're going to agree with, because I don't want to have difficult meetings. I don't want George in my meeting, because George is going to say everything he thinks, and he's always grumpy and he's always difficult. And why would I want him in the meeting? And my point is, that's who you should have in your meeting, right? Trying to help people recognize that if you keep doing the same things, you're always going to get what you got. You need people who are going to get you to see things differently.
George, why did you start My Blended Learning?
Yeah. A couple of really wonderful circumstances kind of fell into my lap, but the opportunity to start my own organization really was born out of the idea that I was hiring a lot of companies, a lot of trainers, a lot of resources that do what I have done now for the last 20 or so years. They had a very formulaic approach that this is the way Toyota does lean. This is the way GE does Six Sigma. This is, the recipe. And you can see this on LinkedIn today. You can see this, in a lot of books and things that are out there, that there is, the rules. If you don't follow the rules, then you're not doing it the right way. And I never thought that that was a good idea, because the company I was working at was not Toyota. It was not GE. And we were doing things with a culture and a customer base that was unique. So the idea that I can photocopy something from a very successful organization and have that just apply without any kind of alteration or kind of thought about the customization, to me, just always felt ridiculous. And I literally could not find anybody who was willing to be open-minded. Everybody was very formulaic. This is the approach we have. And that's what my blended learning was born into, was the idea that we're never going to be formulaic, that we're going to start with needs and requirements. And then, yeah, do I have respect and do I believe there are things that Toyota does that will transform organizations? Absolutely. Same with what GE does. And the reality is the local plumbing business I work with also has some amazing best practices. Just because you don't know who they are doesn't mean that there's not something you can learn. That humbleness and willingness to really apply solutions that are based on need and merit, I think, is a little unique. What we do is a little bit different.
I love it. And so then that has now spawned Capacity to Care, right?
It is.
And so what spurred that instead of just coaching at that corporate level?
It was something I'd always, from being a young person, always did a lot of volunteer work, but I was really just volunteering my time and, trying to help organizations I believed in. And it was, again, a bit of a happy mistake. I was working with a client in actually in Florida, and it was a little bit of a smaller, kind of situation. And we wanted to run a class, but we really just didn't have enough people for the class to kind of work in terms of the exercises and activities and so forth. So I had an idea, and I said, well, maybe we should just offer it to some local charities, see if they want to send somebody for free. Just, we just really want the heads that can come and kind of be a part of these group discussions and activities. And they jumped on the idea, and it was amazing. And the projects that we helped them work on and do were just inspiring. And what I also found was they really appreciated what it is they were being given. Where I have to say, across all of the students I've taught, across, over that 10,000, unfortunately, not all of them have appreciated it for what it really can be or what it is, because you almost take it for granted. This is something my company pays for. This is a class that we're doing. Some people understand it and really, kind of take it. But I found those charitable organizations and the people coming to get that support, that knowledge, that skill, that project, absolutely amazing. So it became something that I just love doing now. And anytime I have an opportunity or a situation, I encourage, people I train, but I also try to practice myself to kind of help those organizations with the talent that we have, the skills that we can bring to not just, kind of pack boxes, but to help them think about the logistics of how many things should be on the shelf.
I love it. I love it, man. So typically about this point in the episode, I pull up a Reddit story that I've found that relates to my guest, and we laugh about kind of the absurdity of the world of work and talk about how to make that situation a little bit more human. In our case, George, the Gallup State of the Workplace report recently came out, and it surveyed workers across 160 different countries. And we're going to talk a little bit about this because I think this really aligns with what you do, right? Because some of the data that came out in this State of the Workplace report is a lot different than past reports have been. So I'll paint the scene here a little bit. So a couple of things that jumped out at me. Only about 1 in 5 employees globally say that they're engaged at work, right? And this is a drop from previous years. And only the second time that it's dropped this much in a couple of decades. The last time was COVID, right? And so we're seeing a really weird global drop in engagement. The one thing that jumped out to me, though, is managers are now the least engaged group in the entire workforce. It's not our frontline employees. It's not the machinists or the welders or the accountants that are on the front line. It's not that C-suite. It's that middle manager level. The correlation between the rest of the team's engagement, Gallup found that 70% of a team's total engagement is driven by your manager or by the manager. So when you've got 20%, 27, I think, let me pull that up. Yeah, 27% of managers globally are engaged at work, but yet 70% of a team's total engagement is tied to a manager. You've kind of got a recipe for disaster right now.
Yeah.
Globally, there was a loss of $9.6 trillion in productivity due to disengagement. So Before I ask you some very targeted questions here, George, what's your take on this latest state of the workplace report by Gallup?
Yeah, it to me is kind of further confirmation of something I've already believed. I actually had a piece on fortune.com a couple of weeks ago about this. I called it, the great flattening, which was not, of course, my term. It's one that's been used by others, but I talked about the great flattening and the impact AI is having on middle management. And
Okay.
I see beyond just the Gallup numbers, just in the work I do with my clients and the visits I make to companies, is AI is doing a lot of really amazing things, a lot of really good things that I think are going to help productivity and help costs and get a lot done. But the people who are most likely to engage in it right now is the ones that are in that data that you just referred to. They're the ones who've decided to stay in their office and let Copilot tell them what to do or tell them how to create something or how to do something. And I believe what is happening is the leaders, the middle managers who've depended on their technical ability, that I became the best at this and I am the one who has the most technical knowledge on this topic. And that's why I'm the manager, the supervisor. They're in trouble. They're in big, big trouble because knowledge is a commodity that I can receive or retrieve or gather that knowledge from any of these kinds of tools that are very rapidly developing. The thing that's not a commodity, the thing that I think is that 1 in 5 in the data that you cited, is the person who's on the floor, the person who's walking the line, the person who's talking to people and getting their perspective and building that respect and teaching and training, not just with the knowledge, but checking that it made sense and getting people to kind of see that pattern, that they see what they do more like a vocation, that I'm not just telling people what to do. I'm trying to teach all of these people to play the guitar. And if I tell them all, this is how you play a guitar, I know none of them are going to play a guitar. I've
Yeah.
got to work with them and I got to support them. I got to tell them when things are well and things could be different. And those people are going to be around indefinitely, in my opinion. And those are the people that someone says, I'm engaged because someone's kind of teaching me to play the guitar here. They're teaching me this difficult job and they're there to help me. The 4 out of the 5, I think, are going into dashboard hell and they're getting sucked into the AI thing. And they're saying, hey, all this technical knowledge, I can write this 1-page work instruction in 10 seconds because AI will do it for me. Well, just because you could write an instruction on how to play a guitar doesn't mean anyone's going to play.
Right. Right. So if I'm reading between the lines a little bit here, George, and I could be making assumptions that you're not intending, and so
Yeah,
that's why I'm clarifying here.
sure.
To me, what I'm hearing you say is AI is not a tool to bring out passion and purpose and pride in people. It's a way to, it's a tool to utilize, but not a tool to generate that kind of emotion and feeling out of the workforce. And those who may depend overly on AI to accomplish their jobs may be losing some of their passion and their purpose and their pride. Am I off base in that assumption?
Not at all. And I do think this could be controversial. There may be some people who will disagree with me, and I respect that. But my evidence is the last time you called a call center and had to hit the numbers, or the last time you were at the grocery store and you had to do your own self checkout, last time you interacted with a machine, how much time did you want to spend kind of being nice to it? Having kind of these friendly exchanges when it's not a person, it's a thing that you're trying to transact with. So there are people out there thinking, no, 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 this is going to be a personality. It's going to be, something that, you can have that give and take with. And I don't know, maybe we'll get there. But regardless of whether the capability exists, I know a machine and I know a person. And I know when I have a person who's taking the time to help me learn, how much I respect that and how much I'm willing to listen and follow their direction. And I don't know that I would do that with a machine. And I think separating out, what I would call the tacit knowledge, this sort of experience from the explicit knowledge with these are the right settings. So this is how you tune a guitar. Yes, AI can help you tune a guitar really quickly, but it's not going to help you play the music.
Right. Right. Yeah, I love it. And personally, I love your guitar analogies. So keep those up, my friend.
Thank you.
Um, so in your experience, is engagement a leading indicator or a lagging indicator of a deeper system failure?
Yeah, I think it's a leading indicator because it's something that you can immediately feel and know. You know, I talk about, and there's lots of examples of this, but I sometimes, not surprisingly, get kind of I think seen as a bit of a unusual duck, a little different, because when I have a chance to visit a factory for the first time, I really don't want to go through the front door. I don't want to sign in the visitor book. I don't want to go sit in the conference room. I don't want to see the PowerPoint presentation. Sometimes I have to because there's just no way around it. But what do I really want to do is I want to park in the employee parking lot. I want to go through the turnstile. I want to see where they clock in. I want you to meet me in their break room. I want to go into the locker room. I want to use the restroom. And I want to kind of start to feel what it's like to work here and what the PowerPoint slide said, but how nasty is that washroom? How many different healthy choices of snacks and things to eat is in that break room? And how many earplugs do you see just laying in the parking lot because people were like, I'm out of here. They just want to head for the gate. It just speaks to the culture. And engagement is where you start to get people who care. And how do I get people to care? I have great systems. I work to reduce waste and frustration, but I also recognize they're people and how I treat them in the sense of the things they interact with, the things they do. I can't tell you how many times I've watched people line up at the time clock because there's some policy that, you got to be within 2 minutes of checking in, checking out. So then, 10 minutes before they clock out, you got the line of people standing there. And I think, how ridiculous is this? That they just want to get to their kid's game. They just want to get to the babysitter. And we're not productive. We're not making anything. We're not doing anything. But somehow, some middle manager has decided that on their spreadsheet, we're not going to have anybody outside of the 2 minutes. And they've never taken the time to walk down to the time clock and realize people start standing there 15 minutes before the end of the shift. What are we doing? We're just frustrating them. Like, why don't we
Yeah.
respect them?
So you're what you seem to be explaining is not only looking at the employee engagement but the employee experience
Oh,
and
yeah.
what the engagement can be seen through the lens of that employee experience. And I think a lot of companies, large and small, tend to treat the employee experience and employee engagement as two completely separate data points or yeah, metrics, data points. Are you suggesting that we need to start looking at engagement more through that experiential lens?
I don't know how you couldn't. Like in my mind, they're inseparable because I cannot imagine a situation where somebody is not necessarily treated poorly, but not treated well in the sense that we have the difficult time clock policy and you have a parking policy, which has me walking a half a mile before I can even get to the time clock. And, there's things that are crawling around inside of the lunchroom, that like, I don't see how somebody has that experience in addition to the supervisor who may not ever come see them to help them play the instrument and say, "Oh yeah, no, I'm totally engaged." Maybe that person's out there, but what that tells me is they would be engaged no matter how poorly you treat them, and there's going to be some percentage of people who are going to just be that positive and that supportive. But yeah, if you want the 80%, if you want, the critical mass, you got to start with what are the experiences these folks are going through. Again, I'd take the C-suite and say, yeah, I'm going to make you park in the fifth layer of the parking deck, not the prime parking spot next to the elevator you get. And yeah, if you're not at your desk at 7 o'clock, I'm going to write you up. Okay, let's see how many days is that going to go?
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about diving a little bit deeper into this report here. There are a couple of quotes in it that really because of what you do jumped out at me. Marketing manager is quoted by saying, difficult decisions put pressure on me psychologically, such as hiring. And sometimes there aren't many resources. And there are also disputes between employees facing problems, new systems, and so on. And this was their reasoning as to why they're less engaged. What, using your framework, using what you do, your coaching, what would be the first step for this marketing manager to reverse the trend of disengagement?
Yeah, I try to simplify things because I think complicated is just never good. So I love the simple framework. Lots of people are attributed to it, but I was first introduced by Stephen Covey. The what, the how, and the why. These three questions, because I think that is the source of creating clarity. And in that exact example, I see that as somebody who can't answer those three questions about their job, about their role in terms of hiring folks. Because if I'm thinking my job is how do I hire people and am I making the right decision? Am I making the wrong decision? And I feel pressure around these decisions, then they don't know why they're doing the job. They don't know
Mm.
the implication of poor decisions, or they don't know the things that, we're really asking them to accomplish. There's not a clear metric or not a clear outcome or objective. When managers focus on making sure the outcome, the objective is clear, and they do a lot to spend understanding why those objectives matter and kind of why those issues are going to, be beneficial or costly, and spend the least amount of time on the how. Like, I don't care how you hire people. You want to go to LinkedIn, you want to go to a recruiter, you want to pay an ad in the newspaper. If I'm getting involved in that, that's the definition of micromanagement. Most leaders, managers spend all their time on the how. And the reality is they should be giving people clear what and clear why. And I think in that example, when people are saying, I'm feeling pressure about this decision, it means they don't know exactly what I'm going to be measured on. And I don't know why, it needs to be correct, or I don't know why this outcome has to be the right thing. So I would have them go back to their leadership and try to get clarity on those three questions, the what and the why being the most important.
I love it. And speaking of your framework or the way you operate, George, give us a brief rundown here. I mean, you walk into thousands of shops, right?
Oh,
Thousands of facilities. What's step one for you in the journey that you go on with your clients?
it, really is what we've talked about today. Like I said, I think of what I do sometimes as industrial tourism, getting a chance to go out and visit all these sites and places. But I have a very specific way. I want to see it from the perspective of the employee, not the perspective of the visitor or the tourist or the manager. I really don't care like what their perspective is, because I know it doesn't matter. What matters are the people who are creating the value and kind of what their circumstances are. I love working nights. So if I get a chance, if I'm going to spend some time, I know the folks on nights are going to tell you exactly everything. They're gonna spill the beans, on anything that you want to learn, anything you want to know, the history, all the reasons, because some of them are there because that's where they started off and they're just getting going. The ones who've been there a while learned the secret that nobody hassles you on nights. So if
Yes.
you want to just do your job and you're okay with, kind of taking a nap during the day, it probably is a lot less stressful than having all of those managers and all those people constantly checking and looking and working. So a lot of them like that, and they'll tell
Yep.
you why, and they'll tell you what's there. Having the opportunity to run a machine, to check in guests, in my book, I talk about going undercover as a housekeeper, just amazing experiences that I think when you walk a mile in someone's shoes, then you can start talking about things we can do to improve the costs and the value. I get so offended by consultants, trainers, leaders who start making decisions about changes they're going to make, and they've never run that machine. They've never worked a night. They've just assumed that because of an education they have or some experience in some other company, I know everything I need to know to drastically, dramatically change. And I don't know, I find it offensive because those people don't deserve that. So for me, it's all about the experience. And that's what informs what I might go into that boardroom or go into that conference room and tell people. And a lot of times it can be a little bit uncomfortable because I'm going to kind of bring the data, bring the truth, that they may not have been willing to see. And that's how change starts, right?
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, this is partly why I no longer do coaching and consulting. I don't have the grit and resilience, mainly because I was good at that uncovering, right? Listening to people, bringing it to the leadership team in a way that sometimes wasn't well received.
Yes.
Um, my problem that came though when action wasn't taken and the employee who I talked to and got the information from about what could make their life better
Yeah.
didn't see any change, right? And to me that's gut wrenching, right? Because
Yes.
if I walk into that facility and I spend a day with employees, I really want to see their life get better, right?
Yeah.
And change in a way that they want to see the change happen.
Yes.
I didn't have the stomach or the resilience to walk out of these facilities knowing well that the owner wasn't going to do bologna sausage with anything that I put in front of them, right? How do
Yeah.
you deal with that, George?
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit of our business model, the way we operate. I won't say I've never done it because I've been weak in moments and I've given in where I've had that sort of direct responsibility to say I've uncovered it and now I'm going to try to make it better. And as you were talking about your experiences, I was like reliving these horrifying moments where I feel like I let somebody down,
Yeah,
I didn't get a chance to deliver. And that's the reason why I really, as a policy, refuse to put myself in the situation. The way I avoid putting myself in the situation is that person who has respect, and I'm figuring out who it is by working nights, seeing that superhero kind of running around that everybody really likes, or the person they're willing to listen to. That here's our supervisor and trainer, but what I really want to do is listen to Jim because Jim really knows what's going on. Part of my process is to figure out who the Jims are, who, the people are who have the respect. And those are the 10,000 people I've coached. Because what I know is if I elevate Jim to the point where people are listening to him, give him a toolkit, a structure to be able to surface issues and create accountability, people rarely argue with themselves. So they'll dismiss me and say, well, this is the outsider. And, once he leaves, we're done. But if I depend on Jim, and Jim's one of my most talented people, and I really know that he has the respect of folks, and now somebody's taught him how to have a voice, I kind of have a problem because now I kind of have to listen to Jim to some extent. I can't ignore him because he's not going home on a Friday night. He's going to be here. He's been here 10 years. He's been here 20 years. And that model of kind of finding that super performer and developing, that's really been our business model. And those are the people I've coached where I
that's
want to leave
awesome.
them behind. I want them to do this, not me.
And are those super performers? And you talk a lot, I mean, the book's right behind you. You talk a lot about them. Are those the people who are investing in this coaching, or are you talking to their organization and saying, hey, look, I can do this coaching. I'm going to make them a super performer, but along the way, you're coaching them to be this person that cannot be ignored within the organization?
Yeah, so our specific business model is we have tended to work with just a handful of clients, 4 or 5 clients typically max. And they tend to be really large, Fortune 100 size organizations. And I've just been lucky enough. A couple of them I've been with more than 15, one of them more than 20 years. And they just know what I do. They know how I do it. And they pay for everything. And they basically kind of give me license to find these people and put them through the program and coach them and support them and develop them into being these resources that they can depend on and they know they can listen to and they kind of expect to kind of hear that voice. Not all of them turn out to be Eddie Van Halen, being that amazing guitar player. They can't all do the licks, but we have more success than we deserve probably, which is why we've been able to keep some of these clients for multiple decades.
I love it. I love it. Second to last question for you, George, and this time has flown by. It's wild. Um, what's one belief about the world of work that you wish more leaders lived by?
That money doesn't matter. I think a lot of leaders are motivated by their bonus. They're motivated by getting the next job, which is going to end up, giving them that next bump in their salary. They make a lot of decisions, and companies structure obviously our compensation as our incentive. And what most leaders don't understand is the experiences that you have early in your career, the number of different kinds of situations you can be in. Sometimes it makes you more money, sometimes it doesn't. The most successful C-suite people I know, and I know a number of highly successful ones, are not people who chased the money. They chased the experiences. And then at some point, those experiences created critical mass where it was obvious that they were in a class that was just uncomparable to people who didn't have that diversity of experience. And it didn't matter what they were earning, but they're going to certainly get rewarded now. So go for the experience, don't go for the cash.
I love it. I love it. George, what didn't I ask you that you want to share with the audience today?
Oh my goodness. Like you said, it flew by. Really enjoyed the time. The ability to help people is really our message. The book Super Performance is basically taking everything that has worked for me, the root cause of my success, and tried to stuff it into 300 pages and give it away for $30. That was, kind of the what, can I take everything that I think has value and try to stuff it into something a publisher would be willing to publish? And the why is I really believe this can be transformative for somebody early in their career, for managers really trying to create that engagement, to kind of be that 1 in 5 in the Gallup study. And I really hope that people get that benefit. So don't hesitate to reach out to me, georgepesansky.com, myblendedlearning.com. And of course, we're also in all of the social media.
All right, fantastic. I'll put some links below, including, George, where can they find the book?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, local bookstores, both obviously hardcover, Kindle, as well as the audiobook is also available.
Oh, very cool. I know a lot of people who listen to podcasts normally, but also sprinkle in some good audiobooks. So pick up an audiobook if you're interested.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be able to be the narrator as well.
Well, you've got a very soothing voice, George. You've
Well,
got a good voice.
I got the face that was made for radio.
That's why I started a podcast, George. And it was originally just audio. Well, thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, if you take anything from today, take away that AI is a tool. It's not a crutch. Take away that we don't want to over dashboard our leaders. We want to give them the opportunity to be out on the floor. Take away what George is offering in his book, Super Performers. George, again, thank you very much for naming what happens to the leaders and to the mindset, and when excellence can truly be formed with the what and the why. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, if you have a workplace situation that you want us to use instead of a Reddit case, you can submit it to me at jim.mayer@themfgconnector.com. The messier, the better. Thank you for being here for this ride today. This has been Work, but Make It Human. Have a great one.